truth of the matter is that the president's not going to have to pardon anybody because the Russian thing is a nonsensical thing. I was there early on in the campaign. I didn't have any interactivity with Russians. I didn't see anybody have any interactivity with Russians.
That was U.S. President Donald Trump's new communications director today responding to questions about presidential pardons. According to the Washington Post, Trump asked his staff about whether, as president, he could pardon his staff, family members, even himself. And of course, then Trump tweeted about it. While all agree the U.S. president has the complete power to pardon, why think of that when only crime so far is leaks against us? Fake news. Amid all the furor over investigations into the Trump team's possible links to Russia, without knowing where they will lead or what they will find, it's raised questions. How far will this go? And could Trump stymie it with the stroke of a pen? Joining me now to discuss this is Kimberly Atkins, the Washington correspondent for the Boston Herald, and Jane Chong, the deputy managing editor of Lawfare, an online blog focused on legal and national security issues. Jane, I'm going to throw it to you first with the big question. What do you think? Can he do it?
I think it's fair to start by saying that this is an open constitutional question, but that the arguments very much favor, in my view, that he cannot pardon himself. There are a lot of reasons for this, but just to break it down to two very basic points. One, you cannot be a judge in your own case, in your own investigation. The framers were apparently so convinced of this that when they discussed presidential impeachment and presidential prosecution, they didn't even mention self-pardoning, which suggests that they thought it was an oxymoron. And second, the impeachment clause actually sets out that an impeached person can also be prosecuted for the crime. This was to prevent any sort of claim of double jeopardy, et cetera, after you're impeached and removed. The fact that there is nothing in there about the president and the president's prosecution, somehow the president exempting himself from prosecution, I think that's more clear evidence that the framers never envisioned self-pardon as a thing.
And Kim, I know this whole conversation is sort of about hypothetical, but it's legitimate because Trump tweeted about it, right? So I think it's fair to ask some what-if questions. And if he were to do it, how do you think America would react? And by America, I include Republicans.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty extraordinary. I mean, I think that no matter of what the legalities are, the political impact would be immense. It would really put people, including congressional Republicans specifically, in a really tough spot. If they don't push back against this notion, that would be extraordinary. But a president pardoning himself, they could face their own political peril. So I don't think he'll see the sort of lockstep support that he certainly would be looking for. I mean, this is really something that is extraordinary. I mean, in the court of public opinion, legalities aside, a pardon is, in effect, an admission of some sort of guilt, right? I mean, the impact would be massive on both the White House and the Republican Party more broadly.
And Jane, you know, I mean, we talk a lot about whether Trump would pardon himself, but he's also talking about pardoning others, people who have been in his staff or in his family. What would be the specific implications of just those kinds of pardons?
I actually think that's a much more interesting question because I agree with Kim that it's cart before the horse to talk about presidential self-pardons. I think his presidency ends on the day that he pardons himself, personally. But of course, he could pardon for any federal offense Mike Flynn or his family members. And we should think seriously about not just the implications of the pardon, but how the threat of a pardon might affect the current ongoing FBI investigation. So to me, those are the interesting questions. And the short answer is, of course, he can pardon his family members if he wanted to. Then the question is, will the House do something about it?
Kim, I see you nodding your head. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that the special counsel, Bob Mueller, is keeping a close watch on all of this. I think one thing that's interesting in how much the president and his son and other people in the White House are talking and tweeting and messaging about this, they seem to be forgetting that in this ongoing investigation, anything that they say and do can essentially be used against them in this, as Bob Mueller is doing this investigation and potentially building a case that could end up in some sort of liability. So the president's legal team, I always marvel at how they're allowing the president and others to give this type of messaging while this investigation is ongoing.
And Jane, I want to put the Bob Mueller circumstance to you, because this, in theory, would affect how he does what he does right now as he investigates that, the whole Russia thing. How would this affect what Bob Mueller is doing right now?
It's not clear that it is affecting him, but I think any reasonable prosecutor who's heading an investigation of this kind of scope and this kind of importance is thinking about all of the possibilities. So to the extent, just for example, to the extent he believes that pardoning key members, that's something in the pipeline, you can imagine that would cause him to perhaps move more quickly with certain witnesses or certain potential witnesses. I just want to clarify that even if you do receive a pardon, that doesn't mean you can't be compelled to testify. It actually means the opposite. If you're immune from an offense, then there's no reason why the Fifth Amendment would protect you as to that offense. The problem, of course, however, is the criminal liability that constitutes leverage when you're trying to get a witness to tell the truth. That would disappear, and that is a problem.
I want to put this to both of you. We're 6 months into this presidency. I remember Donald Trump on the campaign trail talking about how, horrible it would be to have a president under investigation. Of course, he was talking about Hillary Clinton. What does this say about President Trump, that this is the conversation we're having today, 6 months into his presidency? Kim, why don't I start with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is pretty extraordinary that just in 6 months we've already gotten to an issue that has never been litigated in the 200 plus years of this nation, which is whether a president can pardon himself. Not just that we got here, but how quickly we got here. And I think that it is an example of this presidency, which in many ways it delivered on its promise not to be an orthodox presidency, to be different, to shake things up. It's really shaking everything up to the core. Now we've reached a core constitutional question that can have massive implications.
And Jane?
I think candidate Trump's concerns about the distraction that an investigation poses for a sitting president was actually a great insight, and it's something that we should all consider when we're discussing the Russia investigation. The Russia investigation, I want to emphasize, is extremely important, but we should also be thinking, and the House and Senate should be thinking, about the ways in which all of this distraction is affecting governance and is affecting major domestic and foreign policy issues.
Does anything surprise either of you with this president? I have to ask. It's a little off this today, but it just seems like every day it's something else. Jane?
I would say that the firing of FBI Director James Comey did shock me, and because it was so shocking, nothing else will shock me. And hopefully the House and Senate, in light of that firing, which we should not normalize, should be thinking really long and hard about how much they're willing to accept.
And Kim?
I agree. I think the Comey firing was shocking. I think at this point, and again, we're just 6 months in, it's very difficult to imagine anything that would be truly shocking coming out of this, including, if it were to happen, a decision by the president to try to fire Bob Mueller.
Kim Atkins, Jane Chong, thank you both very much. Very interesting.
Thanks for having us.